Hi guys, how you doing? I hope you guys are doing well. You're safe, you're sound, you have running water, you have electricity. Um, it's been a day. And by a day I mean I'm still on like a week ago's timeline. So we're going to talk about how to tame a wild tongue. And I'm going to go through this with you, but I'm going to do it in a little bit different way. Usually I like go through it almost painstakingly and I point out all the details, right? I point out the metaphors and what this means and all the alliteration and whatnot. But this time, actually, I'm going to run you through the rhetorical situation. And why it's important is that we've come to the point of our semester now that um, for your research projects, you should be towards the tail end of choosing what actual pieces you're going to focus on. And so you should be kind of paring down your question now based on the pieces that you've read. And so I asked you probably if you've talked to me or if you've gotten an email from me or a letter from me that you pick your pieces now, read through them, which ones you want to play with that go with maybe the topic or the question you want to work on, and then don't quite analyze them yet because I'm going to show you how to do that. This is where I show you how to do that. And I actually been showing you for a while now. I've been teaching you rhetorical situation in pieces, and now we're putting it together. And so we're going to use this particular essay to kind of illustrate how the process goes. Um, it's the same process for every piece of rhetoric. So it's the same process for an essay, a poem, a short story, a visual, even. So it's the exact same process. The only thing that changes is the strategy. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So, how to tame a wild tongue. You were probably confused about it. It is one of the probably most well read, well known Chicano essays about identity and language and home, essentially, is that has ever been written by one Gloria Anzaldúa, who is like oh, in the Mexican American literature community. So so it's really important that we look at it from that lens. There is some context here that we do have to play with here, and we're gonna get to that when we get to context. Another thing I want to talk about before we start that the structure of this essay is different than probably other essays that you've ever read in the past. It's definitely different from Dr. King's work for the most part, definitely different than Mr. Milk. This actual essay is actually considered a collage essay. And what that means is that it takes a bunch of different snippets and they put it together, and the juxtaposition of the snippets creates a bigger argument. It's almost a collage essay is almost too good to be true in that the how the writer or the author chooses to collage or put together um, leads you to the argument, but sometimes it's just there's so much going on that you miss things. And this is one of those essays where there is so much going on. I almost wish we had 2 weeks to talk about it because there's so much going on. We don't have it. Don't ask. But I almost wish we had talked about it. 2 weeks, maybe in the part two of this class, perhaps. We'll do that. So, what I'm not going to do quite yet is go into the metaphors, the allusions of which she has several, um, the alliteration of which she has a couple. Um, I'm going to go actually on the rhetorical side, and we'll go on the literary side a little bit later. So, this is going to be a long video, so you might as well, get ready for some breaks. Okay, so we start with the rhetorical situation. And so I went ahead and wrote down the steps of the rhetorical situation, and I hope that you can see that here. Let me make sure that you can see that. Sorry if you couldn't. Okay, so there's 5 steps to the rhetorical situation: writer's purpose, audience, topics, context, and strategy. And because we're reading an essay, we're going to use the 8 elements of argument. So depending on what you read, you use different sets of elements. So if we're reading a poem, like Jasper, Texas, 1998, we would use elements of poetry. If we were reading a short story, like The Comet, we would use the elements of fiction. So that goes under strategy, because what strategy really is how the argument is made, right? And so there's different elements that go towards that. So we're going to start with writer's purpose. And we're going to do this like we would do as an assignment. So writer's purpose. This is what writer's purpose is not. Writer's purpose in this structure is not why the writer wrote the thing. I know you probably learned it as that. And that does come up, and it usually comes up under context. But writer's purpose has nothing to do with why Gloria Anzaldúa wrote the darn thing, right? So that's not what we are going to do. What writer's purpose is that it is dun, 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 who the writer is, what they're about, birthday, death date, where they grew up. So the reason why we look at that is that we're trying to break down this piece in beyond the page. Because if you just break down the thing with just the stuff on the page, you're missing a whole other side of the analysis. So I'm gonna just do a Google search for my girl Gloria Anzaldúa, and I've, you know, Googled her many times lately, especially. And I'm gonna hit here, and I'm gonna look about who she is. I'm not gonna hit Wikipedia. Y'all know why. And so I'm gonna look at something called the Poetry Foundation. Of course, we have been using stuff from the Poetry Foundation, so we know they're a pretty good source. So I'm gonna open this up, and I see that she is deceased. So I know that she was born 1942 and died 2004. So I'm gonna go here. Yes, I'm gonna copy and paste, but not everything, right? I'm actually gonna write this out because I do not like how that's gonna come out. 1942 through 2004. So she hasn't been deceased that long, right? So she lived a really long life, right? And so what else can we find out about Ms. Anzaldúa? Let's go back here. Okay. Queer Chicana poet, writer, and feminist theorist. There you go. So if that maybe leads to a little bit about who she is, and well, it does lead to who she is, but what she writes about. First sentence gives us everything. Great. Her poems and essays explore the anger and isolation of occupying the margins of culture and collective identity. Anzaldúa has been awarded the Lambda Lesbian Small Book Press Award, a Sappho Award of Distinction, and the NEA Fiction Award, among others. She is the author of several books of poetry, nonfiction, and children's fiction. Her book, Borderlands, La Frontera, The New Mestiza, and her essay, La Prieta, are considered to be groundbreaking works of cultural, feminist, and queer theories. With Cherie Moraga, Anzaldúa co-edited the landmark anthology, The Bridge Called My Back, Writings of Radical Women of Color. Okay, so we have a lot here, right? So I'm going to copy and paste this only because we need it to like rewrite. So if I were doing, say, the assignment, say um, if I was doing a discussion board, this is what I would do. I would put this here and I would rewrite this in my own words because we don't plagiarize. So you can say Gloria Anzaldúa, who died in 2004, was known for writing about anger and isolation. Then this one I would put in quotes because this is really too good to not put in quotes. Occupying the margins of culture and collective identity. Right? So this is what she is known for. And then I would pick what's important here, and I would put it in here, and I would rewrite it. And then, of course, you're going to get because I'm an English professor, and you, because you're studying English. You would give this, like, I think it's called the Poetry Journal. What's it called? Oh, my goodness. Poetry Foundation. I should know that. Poetry Foundation. Right? So I would do that, right? I would finish it off, blah, 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 blah. I'm sure you don't want to spend most of this time seeing me type and rewrite things. So there you go. That's what I would do. And then what I would do is go to another site. I wouldn't just go to one. Your honor students, you know better. And then I would see what else is on there. You have this Legacy Project Chicago. That could work. This looks like it's from a university. Let's see. Who is she? She said, self-described this, I'm not going to say this word, feminist Tejana, Paleche poet, writer, and cultural theorist. Born to sharecropper field worker parents, September 26, 1942, in South Texas, Rio Grande Valley. After relocating at age 11 to the city of Hargill, Texas, on the border of the United States and Mexico, she entered the fields to work. Wow. So we have a lot of information here too. I think what's interesting here is that her parents were migrant workers and she started working at age 11 and she's a Texan, right? She's a Texan. And then we have her getting her BA in English, art, and secondary education. So she got it. She was a teacher, I'm assuming. She then earned an MA in English and education from the University of Texas. Yeah, she's a teacher. It says right here, instructed a wide variety of students. So we have that information as well, and that opens it up too, right? So I want you to note that what I did, right? We have like the nuts and bolts of everything, and then we found another source that told us a little bit about who she is. We know that parents were migrant workers, sharecropping at age 11. She started working, was born in Texas, and from the border region. She got her BA in English and secondary education, MA in English as well, was a teacher, right? So we have like the official Gloria Anceldua, this is who I am as a writer, woohoo, like the official, and I write all the things. And then we have Gloria Anceldua, the person, right? Who like had sharecropper parents, was in South Texas, born there, was at the border, like literally at the edge of the world, in her world, in her eyes. And then she rose up and became a teacher. So she, in one generation, we have um, uh, a growth into a form of middle class here. So this is a lot, right? So this is writer's purpose. This is what you do for writer's purpose, right? So let's look at audience. And so I'm going to go back to the Googles because Google's has been good to us. And I'm going to look up this, how to tame a wild tongue. Okay. So obviously I've been looking for copies, right? We're not going to do this analysis for how to tame a wild tongue because we're doing it here, right? And also, you have to be careful with these analysis. I'll click on this. Be careful with these analysis because everybody's interpretations are different. Also, how we are analyzing things is different than what other people are analyzing. So they may be analyzing maybe the overall message, it looks like they're doing here, but they also may be analyzing it literally, not literarily, using literature techniques. And we aren't doing that. We're using the rhetorical situation, right? We're doing it, um, looking at it as rhetoric. And though when we're looking at it as rhetoric, we do get into the literary part, but it's not as a deep dive as doing a literary interpretation. It's a completely different thing. It's a completely different process. All right. So I'm warning you now. All right. So lots of summaries. Da 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 da. I'm going to go into Goodreads because I am looking at audience. And for audience, what I want to look at is to see if this was printed anywhere. I know this was printed somewhere because I've read this before. So I'm going to go to Borderlands / La Frontera right here, that book right there. And that's where this book this essay was originally published. But I want to find somewhere where it says it was originally published. Okay. So what do we do? Where was How to Tame a Wild Tongue published? There you go. Google knows it all. It was published here and literally gives us the page numbers. We don't have this book, so we don't need those page numbers, but it's nice to know where this was published. Okay. So we know that this was published in this book. And so what I want to do is I want to know more about this book. I wonder if we can click on it. Okay. I wonder if we can Amazon this. Let's Amazon it. Yeah. So let's go to Amazon and put this in there. Amazon knows it all, um, which is scary. And so we're looking at this, and we know that this book has been around for a while. There's different like editions of this book. So this is an older book, right? I'm gonna see if we have. So this was 1987. Like you can also tell because it's also $83 for the paperback, which means it's in really good condition. I would not purchase this for $83 unless you are a collector. So this is here. Let's see if we can find any additional information. Okay, we have some editorial reviews from Publishers Weekly, and the Library Journal. And we know that I like the Library Journal as a source, but they're both actually pretty good. So we know what this is about, right? So we have this idea that she talks about several cultures and uses a mixture of languages. With exceptional insight, she creates a mosaic of the marginal person, a person like herself who exists in a state of transition, of ambivalence, of conflict, someone who is infused with many cultures yet cannot claim a single one wholly to herself. Okay, does this sound like an audience? Yes, yes, it does. So I'm going to copy this. Now, I'm going to say this and let you know that sometimes it's not this easy. Sometimes it's not this easy. Sometimes you'll read and you're like, I don't know who could read this book, right? So really, we have here the audience like herself. They live on the border of two worlds and don't feel completely part of one over the other, right? So there you go. Maybe people who are bicultural would be an audience, right? Um, Sorry. The easy, low hanging fruit is readers of, I think it's called Borderlands. La Frontera, right? Bicultural people who don't feel part of things. They're on the margins, right? So that's your intended audience right there, right? Your unintended audience is, people who will read it um outside of things. You may have like feminists, because there's a lot of feminist overtones here. Definitely English classes, Mexican American, literature, regular literature classes, right? And then I think what we should also include as far as audience is people who don't normally see themselves in literature. And let me explain that a little bit. And I actually wouldn't be opposed to moving it to intended audience. And I'll tell you why in a minute. So, in the actual essay, she talks about moments where she saw herself in literature. The first time she saw a Chicano book, reading the poem "I Am Joaquin," which we almost were assigned. By the way, I almost assigned that. I couldn't make it fit, um, and so that revelation that of the worthiness of being studied and the worthiness of being read. Um, is also someone else. So it's just like she's also part of that tradition of passing that down. So this is your audience. So I want you to see how long we've been working on this already. And we've done two things: writer's purpose and audience. This goes in depth, guys, right? So you want to like be in depth. So we have a couple of topics that she's talking about. Obviously, she's talking about language and also talking about language as home, as uh, judgment, um, and as separator. So language as border. All right. There's some feminism overtones here. There's definitely some Chicano for power for the people overtones here. So we have those topics there. We have um, just the juxtaposition of the poetry with the etymology study. We have um, the study of words or language, which is etymology, right? She's hitting those. And there's a couple of other topics, but I'm going to stop there because I want to move on. Sorry, 23 minutes in the video and we're still here. So what I would do, um, Chicano as culture, Chicano as language, right? What I would do, um, I keep thinking of them as I talk, is at this point, I would pick a couple, maybe some of the ones you feel strongly about. Like, I think identity is a good one. Chicano as culture, feminism is a good one. Maybe language, or the study of language or etymology. And I would look it up. I literally would do like the the research for this. And I would be not just identity, I would make that Chicano identity. This one alone will take you down a rabbit hole, by the way, just FYI. So I would Google this. Actually, You could Google this, but what I would go with this, especially for topics, because what you need is a good primer, like a solid, good primer on this. I would go to Credo Reference, which is a database that we have. Let me see if I can get into it really quickly. And let me show you how to get there. Okay. So you go to My Own Star, you go to libraries. You probably know this already, but just in case you didn't, that's what you do. Go to libraries, and then you hit research databases. You have all this wonderfulness, right? Go to literature, since we're in English class and we study literature. And what you want to do is go to reference and overviews. That's where it will be. And there's a couple of databases here that are going to be really good for you. We're going to go into Credo Reference right now, but I'm going to also suggest Bloom's Literature. So if you want to look up any of the writers that you are working on, this would be a really good thing for writer's purpose. Would be a really good thing for maybe context sometimes. So that's another place where you can look. But right now we're just going for topics. So we're going to do Credo Reference. We're going to click that. And you would sign in like you would like an online student, because you are. Yay. Okay. So we have Credo Reference, which is awesome. And so maybe you want to talk about cultural identity, right? Because that's what we're talking about, Chicano identity. We're just going to make it cultural, go broad, and then go specific, right? Because Credo Reference is like Wikipedia on steroids. So you want to go broad before you go specific. So I wouldn't say Chicano identity or Latino identity quite yet. I'm going to go cultural, which encompasses everybody. And then I'm going to see if I need to funnel it. So cultural identity, click on it. Hey. Okay, so you have all this information on the left-hand side. And look at this, Latino Praxis, Encyclopedia of Educational Philosophy and Theory, that tells us a little bit about the Latino identity. So it's even helping us doing that. So you have a lot of information here that you can just go through and read through some things to get a good working knowledge of things. This is not to say, oh, this is as deep as this is my research and I'm done with my research project. No, this is just to get a working knowledge so that way you know what to do, what the next step is, right? So um, I also really like this thing on the side, which is a like an idea map or a topic map here. And so you can actually it'll give you alternative ideas or thoughts, and it maps it around it. You can actually click on different things. So we talked about cultural identity, where that was our keywords to get here. I like identity as social science, so I'm going to click on that, and it will change. Yeah, the map will change, and then all of your sources on the left hand side here will change as well. So you can have fun with that. All right. Don't go down so much of the rabbit hole that you can't get back out. All right. Just again, you just need some working knowledge. What are the big issues and thoughts in that topic? Okay. So let's go back. And so that's what you want to do. And it's not that you need to do a book report for under topics. You want to list them and then kind of talk about a couple of them that you think are kind of like the big picture headline ones. All right. Now, context, this is the fun stuff, right? Context. When was this written? Well, I don't know. Let's find out. All right. We're in Borderlands, right? Let's see if we can get an original copyright. This is 1987. Let's see if we can get an original. What's the oldest one they have? I think it's this yellow one because I remember seeing it. Yes, I am that old. Okay, it was not published in 1856. That's a lie. That's a lie. That's a lie. I'm going to go with 87. It won't let me go inside. Or we can just ask Google. You're probably asking, why are you 1987? Look at that. You're probably asking, why am I not asking Google when was the essay published? Remember, the essay was published in this book, right? So we have to see when this book was published, because that means that's when the essay was published. 1987, right? And so this was in the middle of the 80s. And so I would do one of those things. Oh, image is great. So you have this situation here. You have this situation here, which is like archive from Chicago Tribune, published in 85. And so you get a sense of what was going on at the time. Usually, with context, one of the quick ways to look for context is when it was published. Another quick way is to look at the topics, because if they're hitting stuff like Chicano identity, and what was mentioned there, what was mentioned in the actual essay, you can actually go through context that way and say, oh, who's Pedro Infante? What was happening during the United Farm Workers strike? And so, because she alludes to that, right? So you may want to look at that. Because I have taught this and because I know, I'm just going to tell you. But if you don't know, you look it up, right? And you go down that little rabbit hole. So essentially what we have here, this is after the beginning of the Chicano movement. She puts it in 1965, which I think is kind of early, but I was not alive during then, so I am not going to doubt Miss Ansaldúa. So this is from the United Farm Workers. The Delano grapes. I put it at the Delano grape strikes. But what do I know? So you have the Chicano movement. You also have this, like, if she was young, so if she was born in 45, that means she was like 20-ish, in her 20s in 1965, which means that by 87, she was in her 40s. Yeah, am I doing math right? 30s, 40s. She was in her 40s. So this is kind of her coming of age in a second, like a second wave of coming of age. And so this is probably where I would go maybe into the history books as well to learn more about the Chicano movement and then what happened after the Chicano movement, what happened to the children of the United Farm Workers strike. I can tell you right now, what happened to the children. She is like quintessential. What happened to the children of sharecroppers or migrant workers, or those who worked in the fields. They went to college, so they were the first generations to go to college, and we had the whole wave of this first generation in college, and so they're now straddling two worlds: the worlds where they were from and the new world that they are coming into. So if you're a first generation in college, you probably identified a lot with this piece. Um, and so she talks about it there. So that's our context here. This is a coming of age of her identity. This is after the Chicano movement, which I personally think never stopped, but that's okay. The Chicano movement, it's like the maturing of that, and just that idea of moving into different spaces. And she talks about that in the piece where she talks about what language she speaks when she's with certain people in certain groups in certain social circles. She talks about code switching a lot. Let me put that in topics. That's probably not a phrase you've heard before. In code switching, we all do it. Some of us do it um, in a different on different levels. But essentially, how you speak with your friends is different than how you speak with your parents. How you speak to me as your professor is different than how you would speak to perhaps your boss, right? You have those things and you slip in and out that entire time. Well, she's talking about doing that code switching, but through language. Um, what means one thing to one group who speaks Spanish means something different to another group who speaks Spanish. And like one group thinks that's their Spanish is broken, and the other one says no, this is kind of it's a growth and it's a change in the language. So yeah, code switching is a thing. And so we have that coming of age with her identity and her language. There you go. Right? So we've done 1 through 4. We've done context. We've done it all. And this is where I'm gonna also suggest that you actually talk to people, like talk to your fellow classmates, right? You guys are all on teams, so you should use that tool. If it's something like, "Hey guys, this is what I got for context. What did you get for context?" You can say it on Teams. Yes, I'll be watching, but I'm not going to say anything. You know why? Because some of this stuff is really hard to get on your own, right? And this is kind of you also get a much fuller conversation and understanding of a piece when it is shared. So you definitely want to like use the tools at your disposal to have the conversations you need to fully understand and engrade pieces with you. A couple of you have similar pieces that you're working on for your research projects, and but different topics or different research questions, but the same piece. And you're going to come up with probably different interpretations, but it's nice to talk about what one person sees versus what another person sees. What I'm saying is there is no right answer, but there's lots of wrong answers. It's a weird thing. You'll get used to that feeling of uncertainty. Okay, so 37 minutes in, I want to point that out because this should take about 45 minutes to an hour to do. Granted, I've been talking um, through different things, but this is pretty on par of how long it should take you to do these things, right? If it takes you less than 45 minutes to do this process, you have done it incorrectly and you need to go back. And if you don't know where to go back, then you can actually message me. We can talk, I can talk you through it. And then I can say, all right, make sure you go, did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? And then you'll see where you went wrong and you go back, right? This is just another way to rewire your brain. All right, so we are at the part where we're actually going to go into the piece, right? We're going to go into the piece. So your 8 elements of argument: issue, claim, evidence, audience, persuasion, reasoning, assumption, appeals, which are ethos, logos, pathos. Ethos, logos, pathos. Right. So that's it. You've seen these before. So I'm going to go through them as we look for things. So the first thing is issue. Let's go into the wonderful piece. And of course, you know that your favorite English professor in the world totally did her annotations because she does not teach without annotations. All right. So the first thing is issue. And what issue is that it is a question. If you don't have a question next to the word issue when you're doing this, then you don't have it. Then you need to go back and look for the issue. Sometimes the question is in the piece, sometimes it's not. We're very lucky that one of the questions that she's kind of trying to answer is in this piece, right? So, um, there you go. Sometimes it's not. Um, like for something like Letter from Birmingham Jail, it is. You know, he, you know, People ask, why am I in Birmingham? Question mark. Then he answers it. I'm in Birmingham because injustice is here. Where else would I be? Right? So that that is letter from Birmingham jail. Sometimes I don't remember I don't think the Hope speech had a question. It may have had a question. Um, Sometimes you don't get a question. You just have to glean the question that they're trying to answer. And every essay piece is trying to answer a question. Here in particular, she has it right on the front page. And it's almost the title. Let me highlight it for you. Well, let me highlight it better. And I think, how do you tame a wild tongue? Ugh, I'm really bad at this. And how do you tame a wild tongue? Train it to be quiet. How do you saddle it and bride it? How do you make it lie down? Right? How do you make it like everybody else? Essentially, is what she's asking. So that is your question that she is asking there. And that's your issue, right? She's also literally asking it in the title. How do you tame a wild tongue? Right? So say you're doing this, right? You're doing this for maybe a discussion post, or maybe you're doing it on your own for your own pieces. Maybe this is part of your research log, or I mean, sorry, your research journal, or maybe this is something, these are part of notes that you're taking, right? You want to put more than just, oh, this is what it says here. And this is how we start interpreting things, right? This speaks to a form of normality, as if she or they do not belong, right? Or whatever your interpretation is, right, of the issue. There you go. Definitely write more than one line. Write several lines. It's good for you. Eat your vegetables; they're good for you. And so we move on to claim. And claim is literally, it's a statement where they're making a declarative statement. I am Hamlet. I am here because injustice is here, like a claim. So she has a bunch of them here. Um, so many. And so it's almost like they're answering, they don't necessarily have to answer the issue. But sometimes it's almost like they're answering. And so she answers this claim here. Um, right here. I'll show you here in a minute. I've started typing. Now, this is just one of several claims. She makes a lot of claims. This is a long essay, right? This is just one claim. There's many. So you can pick one, you can pick a couple of your favorites, right? You feel, I like to say a claim, it's like, it's a claim because you can put it like on an Instagram and put a pretty picture on it and share it on Instagram, right? You feel it. It's a definite like whoa moment, right? So this is an um interesting line, and I'm going to show you where it is. It is on page 54. And it is here. Wild tongues can't be tamed. They can only be cut out. There it is. Um, so this kind of speaks a little bit about um, that you can't really kind of assimilate to the big thing, right? It's like there is no choice. Like you can either be wild or you can be tongueless, but you can't tame your tongue to be anywhere in the middle, right? You can't tame your tongue to be uh just like everyone else. So that is what this claim is saying here. Um, and so we have this idea of definitely being out in the fringes, being out in the margins, and being almost reckless with it. Um, Jamaica Kincaid wrote a story called Girl, which is one of my favorites. It's one of my favorites because the mother in that particular short story, which is one sentence, by the way, um, calls her daughter a slut. And she's not calling her a slut because she doesn't want her daughter to be sexually promiscuous. It's that she's calling her daughter a slut so she is not ousted from society for not following the norm. And this claim reminds me a lot of that idea of not being part of the norm, not being part of what is considered proper, right? And so that's what's really interesting about this claim. Let's go to the next one. Evidence. Whew, this almost the entire essay is evidence, right? I am gonna talk about how sometimes evidence can be logic, so it can be logos, right? Because evidence, when you think about evidence, you think about data and stats, and that is evidence. But also, what's evidence is anything called an antidote and antidote. I say it wrong. Sorry. Which is like a little short story, kind of like I'm going to prove my point by telling you a little story about my life. And she does this a couple of times. I like the one at the end when she is talking about seeing Pedro Infante, I think. Yeah, she's seeing Pedro Infante. Um, and she's going to the uh movies to go see him, and like, oh my god, we're seeing him. They sing Pancho Villas's song La Cucaracha. So we have all that, um and that is evidence, and she is presenting evidence on like culture. She's doing a lot of things at the end here, on 60. I would start this off in like 59, where she's giving you a lot of cultural markers of being Chicana in the 60s, when she read her first Chicano novel. And so it's under the section called Vistas, Corridos y Comida, My Native Tongue, right? So that's that particular section of the collage. And so she's talking about all this, and this is evidence of what it was like to be Chicano in the 60s, in the 70s, um, at a work situation, at a social situation. And so these stories are kind of proving her claim and proving um, what she is saying in this particular essay. She also has another section where she's talking about the etymology of of Spanish, or not the etymology of Spanish, but she's talking about the growth of words, and how words change. It's called Chicano Spanish. It's in that section. It's on page 57 of your handout. And so when she's going through that, she's actually giving you almost a history lesson of like the Spanish tongue on new land, essentially, on Texas land, on Southwest land. And so that's another example of evidence. Let's go to audience. Audience, we've already done. Don't you love it? Audience is already done. Intended, unintended audience, we know, we got it. Moving on. Persuasion. All right, this is difficult. Persuasion is not trying to persuade someone to your point. This is what we know it to be, but in this instance, persuasion is giving up part of your, or conceding part of your argument to make a bigger argument later. Dr. King does this a couple of times in Letter from Birmingham Jail, when he says, you said wait, you said wait, you say wait. And yeah, waiting is a good idea. However, we did wait and look where it got us, right? So that's what persuasion is. You concede part of your point. You concede that they have a point, so you can make a bigger point later, right? There is not an example of persuasion in this. And I really looked for one. If you find one, let me know. But there's not an instance of persuasion in here that I could see. And I thought about why that could possibly be. And it's because this piece is very unapologetic. There is definitely a tone where it's some parts you want to cry, other parts you want to cheer her on, other parts you're angry for what's happening. And so there's not persuasion here because she's not conceding any point. She's not conceding at all. She's just saying, she's telling you what it is. And so there is no persuasion in here. And I find that fascinating as someone who teaches and studies rhetoric, and is a writer, because we are all taught to concede something, um, or whatnot. Um, but she's just like, nah, it is what it is, and there's no apologies for this. Which, as a feminist, that also helps me out a lot too. Okay, so let me see. Let's talk about reasoning. All right, this is what reasoning is not, ladies and gents. Reasoning is not why. It is not why. It does not mean why. Reasoning, my friends, actually means the order of the argument. Now, you can do reasoning a couple of ways. The traditional way, of which I've taught before, is kind of what order she's putting everything in. Like, she started with the issue, she got to claim next. She went to audience, then she went to evidence, maybe she went down to ethos, and then she went back to persuasion, and da 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 da, right? So that's one way to do it, to kind of track it, right? Because you're literally looking at kind of like the nuts and bolts and the build of the argument. Or you can talk about how I've done it here, is kind of how she's um, talking about maybe one of the topics back when we talked about topics up here. Remember his? hmm How she's talking about one of the topics and how she's building up the argument for that one topic. And that could actually help you out, especially when it's journal time, especially when you're looking for what to talk about for your research project. So I have a long list here, OBS. So I'll type a little bit of it for you. So she starts off with the actual physical tongue. I'll try to type it out for you correctly. How about that? The actual physical tongue, right? And she moves from the tongue to accents, to gender identity, to cultural identity. By the way, gender identity would be a really good topic as well. So sometimes as you're working, you think, oh yeah, that would be a good topic. And if it pops in as you're working on another part of this process, you can go ahead and put it in there. Language has changed. Language as home. I really tracked it. Then she has language as academics. She goes back to culture. She goes back to overall general identity. Then she talks about dual identity. And this is where she has, oh, I missed a whole page. Sorry. Anyway, that's how it goes. I have 3 pages, well, bottom parts of the page where I'm tracking it as I'm reading it. Oh, she talked about this, she talked about this. And this is really just where it's all going, how it's all building, right? And with something like this particular essay, which is a collage essay, you kind of want to do it this way because because what's important in a collage essay is a juxtaposition of the things she's putting in there. She has Mexican sayings, which in Spanish they're called dichos. She has uh, poetry lines. Um, she doesn't have song lyrics, I don't think. I didn't see a song lyric. She doesn't have song lyrics. She has another Mexican saying. So she has that. Um, and she's also like quoting other artists as well. And other artists who are uh, have a sense of duality as well. So we have all that there. Yes. Hallelujah. Reasoning is going to take a bit too. It's not going to take a bit as much as like what we're on, which is strategy, but reasoning will take a little bit because you're actually forced to look at kind of the inner workings of the essay, how it's actually moving. So you're charting it. Assumption. And the assumption goes two ways. It's the writer's assumption of what he or she thinks the audience knows, or the audience assumption on the topic. And she has one here at the end where she says, and this is on page 63. She has a couple of them here, but let's go to 63. Okay. Where she says, Los Chicanos, how patient we seem, how very persistent. There's the quiet of the Indian about us, right? And so this is kind of like an assumption that she's making here about the audience and what they think about Chicanos, that they are indeed a very patient and calm people. And they are very like, they're not going to really rock the boat much, right? Because you hear about the civil rights movement and the Chicano movement, but the Chicano movement really happened maybe in pockets of places and in the Southwest, versus you were hearing about the civil rights movement like every night on the TV set, right? So um, there's this, she is kind of pointing out the perception of the Chicano right here. Um, she's making an assumption. Boom. Boom. And that's that. Moving on. Now we go to the appeals, of which she pathos, um, of which she makes several. They're everywhere. Um, they are everywhere. So let me point out a couple. Let me point out a couple. So we have this section on page 55. Where she is talking, Chicano Spanish sprang out of the Chicanos' need to identify ourselves as distinct people. We need a language with which we could communicate with ourselves, a secret language. For some of us, language is a homeland closer to the Southwest, where many Chicanos today live in the Midwest and the East. And because we are a complex, heterogeneous people, we speak many languages. Some of the language we speak are blah, 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 blah. All right. So there's a couple of things here happening. This is an interesting section because you can have ethos and logos happening here at the same time. So here's the ethos. She has a PhD in this thing. She's got a PhD in languages, man. So she knows what she's talking about. There you go. So that's her ethos, right? And then you have logos, which is the logic part. And another example of evidence here where she just breaks it down logically. Here's what we can do. We can do standard English, working class and slang English, standard Spanish, standard Mexican Spanish, North Mexican Spanish dialect, Chicano Spanish, and it's bi-regional, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California. Then you have Tex-Mex and Pachuco, which is also called Chalo. So you have all that. So that's a wonderful example of logic, wonderful example of logos, right? And ethos, because she's kind of coming out to play like, let me put down my PhD and let me show you what I know. So there's a really good example of ethos. Um, we have another one on 56 and the next page, and I literally have it marked here like just ethos exclamation point and kept it moving because there's so much to unpack here. Words distorted by English are known as angelisms or bochismos. I should know that word. The pocho is an anglicized Mexican or a Mexican or American of Mexican origin who speaks Spanish with accent, characteristic of North Americans, and who distorts and constructs the language according to the influence of English, right? This is all ethos. This is all her breaking it down for us. Just like, I kind of know what I'm talking about, and here it is. I kind of wrote a paper about it. I'm writing a whole book about it. There you go. So that's that. That's her ethos. You know, pathos is loaded all through here, but it's a lot of pathos about that's really loaded onto the reader. What the reader feels, and you get a sense of here that she does not care about what she don't care about your feelings. Um, she does care about making her feelings known and being heard, which is another, I think, topic or a theme of this, of the idea of a tongue being cut out, not being heard, of a language uh, being told that it's bastardizing another language, which is a colonial language. It is not real Spanish, it's like Chicano Spanish, right? So the bastardization of that, and then if you're calling my language a bastard or you're calling my language not right, then you're calling me not right, not right. Now we have a problem. So it's very much that way. Um, and so a place where I um, where I saw a really good example, and I've already talked about it before, um, is of pathos, is that it almost looks like as if she lets her guards down when she's talking about being um, at the at the movies watching Pedro Infante with her family, right? It's almost that um, that evidence part is also can also be a pathos part, because that's like the part where it's most like a mask has come down and she is most vulnerable. She's talking about her life. Um, and that is a culmination of everything she's talked about in this piece, and every idea that she has put together in this piece is culminated in these like little anecdotes at the end, and how she rises up and almost it climaxes to I'm gonna be all right. It climaxes to this idea of like you can't call me incorrect or anything I do incorrect. Um, I am a reflection of my people, and my people are good, essentially. Um, but more than we count the blows, we count the days, the weeks, the years, the centuries, the eons until the white laws and commerce and customs will rot in the deserts they've created, lie bleached, humillados, humildes yet proud, sorry, humbled yet proud, quiet yet wild. Nosotros los Chicanos, us, the Mexican Chicanos, will walk by the crumbling ashes as we go by our business, stubborn, persevering, impenetrable, yet stone, yet possessing a malleability that renders us unbreakable. We, the mestizas and mestizos, will remain. So going from this insecurity to this strength, right? So that's where you have that wonderful pathos, right? It's an interesting way how she's playing with pathos. All right, I'm looking at the clock. It's been an hour. And it took us about an hour to do this. So we went through the whole part of the rhetorical situation. If you're still watching, you probably drowned out by now, so I apologize. Um, and we went through the entire process. It took a solid hour, even with me just meandering a little bit here and there. It still took an hour because you still have to look up those things. And I know this. So imagine how long it should take you, right? So I want you to go through the process with this so you can apply the same process to what you are reading for your research projects. No, I'm not going to go through all the little itty bitty stuff, but I can say there's some alliteration, lots of imagery here. I can say that there's lots of allusions, especially in the vistas, corridos y comida, my native tongue. There's lots of allusions there. Um, I really like this quote. I cannot take pride in myself until I accept as legitimate Chicano, Texas, Spanish, Tex-Mex, and all the other languages I speak. I cannot accept the legitimacy of myself. Brilliant. Brilliant. Yeah, so all the text, all those wonderful markers. There's some metaphor here. I did say allusions, right? The juxtaposition of everything. I probably should do another video on just kind of the form and the structure of this essay, because that in of itself, um, that in of itself is its own conversation. What she chooses to put in this piece painstakingly, and what she chooses to um, share personally and share in her under her many hats as an academic, as a Chicana, Tex-Mex person living here, as an academic, um, as everything, right? How many hats she's wearing in this. And then the order of which she's putting this together, which is another thing you want to look at for collage essays, is the order of which things are put together. I'm done talking. You're done listening if you're still here. All right. Email me. Let me know how I can help. I am done. I'm going to bed. Bye.